In today's video, we're going to debug the build size of an Ember application. And to do this, we're going to use Ember Maps codebase. So the tool we're going to use for this is called Broccoli Concat Analyser. And what this does is it hooks into the Broccoli build, and it gives us this really cool visual that shows all the files that were included in the build and how those files affect the final file size. So to get started, there's these usage instructions down here. So let's go ahead and install this by copying this command. And so the next step is to use the latest version of Broccoli Concat, but we can just skip over this step. We're using an older version of Ember CLI, and that version of Ember CLI, which I think we're on 2.18 or 2.17, works fine with this tool. So we don't have to worry about updating Broccoli Concat. We're just going to leave this as it is. Okay, and the next step is to run ember.s with this concat stats true env variable. So we're going to paste this here. Now, because I'm using the fish shell, I have to prefix my envs with the word env. If you're using something like bash or zsh, you can just copy the command right from GitHub. So we're going to build our Ember app with this env variable, and what this is going to do is this is going to give us a folder with a bunch of stats for the build. Okay, so now that my build has successfully built and the server's running, I can go ahead and I can stop the server. And if I do get status, I'm going to notice this new folder called concat stats 4. And the next step is going to be to run that npm package that we installed in step 1 on that folder. So again, I'm just going to copy this and run it. Okay, so this command finished, and what it did is it created a HTML file for us. So what I can do is I can use open, which is a command on OS X, and I can go and open that file that was just created. And this is going to run that HTML file in my web browser. And here we go. Here's the build for the Ember Map codebase. So the cool thing about this graph, this chart here, is that it makes the bigger files take up more space on the screen. So it gives us a good estimation of how big files are. And right away I can see like Faker.js. This is one of the biggest files here, and this is as big as Ember itself. So this is something that's taking up a lot of room in my build. Same with Lodash over here. The nice thing about this chart is that it groups everything. So these are all the vendor assets. So these are things like Ember and add-ons, where Ember Maps codebase is over here. And here I see some pretty big ones like this cache HTML response and this cache API response. And then down here we have our CSS and then some of our test files as well. Now you'll notice that one thing is missing. We have our vendor CSS, but we don't have our application CSS. And what's going on is Broccoli Concat Analyser only shows the files that pass through Broccoli Concat. So this is going to be mostly JavaScript and some vendor CSS. Now for our application CSS, we're using Sass. And with Sass, we rely on Sass's import system to concat all our files. So Sass is going to take all of our SCSS and use our Sass imports to create that final application CSS file. And because Sass is going to output one CSS file, it's not going to need to run through Broccoli Concat, and therefore Broccoli Concat Analyser won't pick it up. So our application CSS is unfortunately going to be missing from this tool. There's one other thing about this chart, and that's these files that are included. So you can see, again, I have Faker, I have this cache HTML response, this cache API response. All of these things come from Mirage, which we use in development mode. And we like developing our application against Mirage. So I don't want to remove these, even though Faker takes up a ton of space. I like having that in the dev build. The thing is, when we ship our code base to production, we don't include Mirage, we don't include Faker, we don't include these Mirage factories over here. And so when I'm generating this chart, I want to do so in production mode and not include my dev build. So instead, I'm going to run env concat stats true, and I'm going to do ember build with an environment of production. And this is going to let me see all the files that end up in my production build and not my development build. Okay, and here we go. We have our production build, and then we're going to run the Concat Analyser command again to generate a new graph for our production build. Okay, now that this finished, let's go ahead and open that HTML file again. So this is a little weird. In this chart, I'm seeing a vendor.js file right here that looks like a debug build, that looks like a development build, because I have ember debug and I have faker. And then over here in this purple, I'm seeing another vendor.js build that looks like it's a production build because it has ember.js, it has no faker. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clear out the concat stats for, and then I'm going to rebuild my app in production mode. So now that we have an empty concat stats folder and we're running this command, we should end up with only this command's stats in our concat stats for folder. Okay, let's run the analyzer command. Okay, now that it's done, let's reopen the index. Okay, and this is much better. I only see one vendor.js. So just a little reminder, between every build, we should be clearing out that concat stats for folder. So when I look at this output, I see sort of the usual suspects, this Ember production build. We're including the Babel polyfill because we need our website to work on older versions of IE. Moment, velocity, these are all things that we need to be running in production. Over in our add-on tree, I see Lodash, and that's taking up about 70 KB. Our final build is 430 KB. So 70 over 430 is about 16%. So that means about a good chunk of our production build is Lodash. Now, EmberMap is a code base that I work on all the time, and I can't remember the last time I used Lodash. So I'm going to come over to the editor, and I'm going to do a quick search for Lodash, see where it's used. Okay, so that is a lot of results. And what's happening is it's finding a lot of this in concat stats for. And the way my editor is set up is to search for all non-get ignored packages. And concat stats for is not part of get ignore. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to add concat stats for. And now because I've changed my get ignore, I have to restart my editor because it reads that in at boot up time. So I'm going to run Atom again. And then now I'm going to search for Lodash. And there we go. That was a lot faster. I only have fewer results. So I'm going to ignore the yarn lock file. And I can see that Lodash is imported in a couple of Mirage, once in the config and once in a factory. So if we look at these files, we can see that Lodash is really only used 3 times. Twice in Mirage up here, and then once in an integration test. So it looks like Lodash isn't even used in production. We're only using it in development. So there's a few ways that we could fix this. We could refactor all these Lodashes to just being plain old JavaScript functions. Another way we could fix this is to only load Lodash when we're developing and testing our application, but not include it in our production build. And that's what we're going to do today. So it looks like the way that we're loading Lodash is with this Ember Lodash add-on. And unfortunately, Ember Lodash has no way for us to configure that it only gets loaded in development and not production. So we're going to go ahead and remove this. So now that we've removed Lodash, we should be able to run this integration test and see a failure. Since we've removed Lodash from our application, this import underscore from Lodash line should no longer work. So to do this, we'll just filter our test suite by styled. So if I run ember test and I use a filter of styled, I should see a global failure. Okay, perfect. I see this error here, could not find module Lodash. So we know that if we can get Lodash working in test and development mode, this test suite should now start passing. So we need a way to get Lodash into our application. So let's go ahead and visit Lodash website. And for this video, we're just going to grab the minified CDN version. So we will copy this and throw it into our applications vendor folder. So we'll save this, and we need to now import it into our Ember CLI build. So in this file, we do some app.imports already. So now we want to say if app.env does not equal production, then we'll go ahead and app.import vendor Lodash min.js. So this makes Lodash available as a global in our application. However, with an Ember CLI app, there's one more thing we need to do. You'll see that in our tests, we're importing underscore from Lodash. And in order to make this import available, we need to use something called the vendor shim. So we're going to go over to the terminal and use a generator to generate a new vendor shim called Lodash. Okay, and now let's go ahead and take a look at this file that was created. So this creates a new importable module called Lodash, and it's equal to self Lodash, and self here is a reference to window. Now, because we're using that Lodash min.js, we need to change this to an underscore because Lodash min.js makes the global underscore available. So just to recap this, we're going to take window underscore and define it as a module called Lodash. So any of our code can now import underscore from Lodash like we see right here. And then there's one more step. We need to app import the shim. So I'll copy this line and then it will be vendor shims and it's called lodash.js. So let's save all these files. And with any luck, our test suite should now pass. So let's run those style tests again. Awesome. So we have Lodash, we have it imported, and our tests are all passing. Now, the real question here is, have we successfully removed Lodash from production by doing this? So the way to test that is to first rm that concat folder and go ahead and rebuild our app for a production environment. Okay, and now I'm going to go ahead and run that concat analyzer command. Okay, and then now let's open that HTML file. And there we go. Over in our vendor build, I no longer see Lodash. And in fact, before, if you remember, the total file size was 430-ish KB, and now we're down to 386 KB. That's pretty cool. We took off about 45 kilobytes of compressed JavaScript just by removing the Lodash library and importing our own shim for development and test mode. So that's one of the things I really like about this Broccoli Concat Analyzer. It lets you quickly get some insight into all the files that are being included in your production build. And if you notice some low-hanging fruit, you can remove it. This is Ember Maps code base. This has been around for about 2 years, and we were able to quickly identify that we're not really using Lodash, and it was easy to remove without touching any of the code. We just had to figure out a way to import it in development and test mode. So yeah, this is a great tool to help you fine-tune your production build.